Hello, and welcome to the Scott Mize Show, a podcast focused on health, diet, bodybuilding, and philosophy. I interview experts, doctors, coaches, and N=1 case studies to answer your questions about improving health, achieving your best physique, and making sustainable progress. We'll cover topics from carnivore and ketogenic diets to bodybuilding to life philosophy and everything in between. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by LMNT Electrolytes. This month, we're switching it up with an exclusive offer that's only for VIP LMNT partners, including Carnivore Cast listeners. You can now receive this free sample pack along with any regular purchase when you use my custom link, which is provided in the show notes or my Instagram link in bio. That's drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast, all one word. And as I said, I'll include the link in the show notes. LMNT Electrolytes are convenient, evidence-based, and delicious, and get yours today to help support the show. Thank you.
This is a quick disclaimer before we start the show. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical advice, and please consult with your physician before making any changes to your diet, exercise regime, or medications. Thank you, and on to the show.
Jodi Wellman is the founder of 4,000 Mondays, a UPenn trained positive psychologist, executive coach, and the author of the new book, You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. Jodi has been featured on TED Talks, Oprah Daily, the LA Times, and more for her new book. Welcome to the show, Jodi.
Oh, thank you for having me here, Scott. Excited to be chatting with you.
Yeah, me too. Very excited. We were chatting a little bit before about some of the work I did way back in another life in organizational behavior. But I'd love to start with your background. How'd you get interested in this topic? How'd you arrive on studying positive psychology? And what was that personal journey like for yourself?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. You know, because I like to talk and write and draw and do all the things about mortality as a motivator, I recognize it can sound a little bit alarming potentially and also confusing, like, what happened to you? It's almost like this is undertone of like, did you have a lot of death and destruction as a child? And I'm pleased to say not too much. I've always been interested in the idea that we work hard to enjoy our lives, ideally even love our lives at times, and then all of a sudden, inexplicably, oh, we're going to die. So that juxtaposition's always been almost philosophically baffling. You know, there's a branch of philosophy called absurdism. Like, sign me up for that. Like, WTF is up with this? So that's always been around me, just mentally. But here I was working corporately for 17 years, and I transitioned into leadership development and coaching. And I've always had this interest in this topic, and I wanted to do something in terms of workshops, but I didn't know how to do it because I was afraid that, well, like I said, people would think I was a complete morbid weirdo. And like everything, it's like all how you package it. But I hadn't quite figured it out, and I was too afraid, and I was too stuck in this notion I have to be professional, and you have to say it like that in the robot voice, obviously. And then amidst all that, my mom went and died in her late 50s of a heart attack. And that for me was a real impetus amidst a lot of this, because when she died, as kind of my version of the story goes, she had so many regrets. Like, she had all these dreams that she didn't execute. And that for me was the saddest thing, was that she was so talented and creative, and, she wrote and she drew and she had business ideas. And here I am, like, I like to write, I like to draw, I have business ideas. And it was a wake up call for me of like, oh, honey, you are going to go down that same path. Hopefully not of a premature heart attack. We'll leave that one aside. But if you don't do something, you will also die at some point with all these dreams stuck inside you. And that for me was just the most grotesque idea and feeling. And so that has helped to shape me going, wait a sec, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to study it and I'm going to do it. And now there's no turning back,
Very cool. Yeah. And that brings up a lot of thoughts. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think a lot of us, our parents worked very hard. It's like, I think about this often, that in history, like, a lot of people today, young people, privileged people especially, are like, oh, I'm not the most passionate about my job. I don't love my job. I don't love my life. I want more meaning. I want more this. I want more that. And sometimes I'm like, how entitled are we? Like just a few hundred years ago, like people couldn't afford to think like that. It was just like live and like survive, And I think for some of our parents, they were close to that too. They were just, you have to work to make money to support your family, to raise a family. And but still, I think some of our parents were teetering on the edge of like there were things they could have done where they had these regrets.
Oh, the teetering. That's such a good point. So you're making me think now, Scott, about my dad. My dad always wanted to be a sports broadcaster and or a journalist, but something in sports and something about expressing himself. And back in that day, it was very much to your point, like different cultural times, like, well, then I will just go get a job as an accountant because there's a pension and I'll be able to look after my family. And like dreams don't matter when it comes to vocation back then. But I agree with you. I feel a little bit like the pendulum has swung a bit of like almost deleteriously, where now there is this idea like my job has to be super passionate, passion inducing and or meaning inducing and or like it's like a constant pursuit that, let's be honest, we're never going to fully find it.
Yeah.
It's like the burden of choice combined with also like we're going to change and evolve. And so I get a little bit worked up on this topic about how I think we put too many eggs in the basket of work to be like the delivery system about a happy life, when it's like, what if we just accepted that work is going to be work? Don't hate your job.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously try and find a job that doesn't suck the soul out of your face, but then also what about building a life outside work that gives you fulfillment and joy and meaning too?
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that point up. And how did you start the 4,000 Mondays? Where did the idea for that come up? And what is it?
Mm-hmm. Well, 4,000 Mondays, name of my company, and it's based on the idea that we only get 4,000 weeks on average to live. And women get a little more, 83 years. Men get about 78 on average. And that, like 4,000 Mondays is the culmination, I guess the center point is like the work that I do. And when you ask kind of where this idea came from, it was this like smoldering fire along all the years where I was collecting articles about stoicism, where I was looking at quotes and finding them all so moving and stirring and realizing that like, man, Nietzsche says famously, like, man is the only animal that has to be encouraged to live. And,
Interesting.
The idea that we have in our moments, our finer moments, really good intentions. And then we get dormant and we just kind of start to live in a little bit of autopilot versions. I started seeing that in myself. I started seeing that when I got into executive coaching. Clients that are just super, maybe one-dimensional, very focused on work, very focused on kind of the routine and like mastering that rung of the corporate ladder. And nothing against ascending. Like if that floats your boat, do it. And also feeling a little bit of that pang of like, is this all there is? Or like, I have other things I want to do that I may be leaving on the table. And that again was a part of my kind of education along the way of like, we just have like a whole crop of people out here that are working hard and busy, and that feels good, but they're like, life is getting left on the table. And that felt again more like that version of a bit of a travesty that I saw when my mom died.
Yeah. Interesting. And you're making me think also of like how fleeting inspiration and motivation can be. I think all of us have had the feeling of like watching a lecture or attending a workshop or having some book we read and feeling like we're going to do these things and feeling really motivated. And then you have to go pick up your kids after work, and then you have to make dinner, and it kind of just falls away. And there's this saying I've heard more in the like health and fitness context, which is like people will only change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of doing something.
Oh, hello. Okay. So my first 17 years working corporately was running health clubs. And so I ran a national chain of health clubs, and I am very well versed in the notion about what it takes for someone to get to the feeling like, I've got to go work out, or, I got to fix my life. Yeah. And you are right. It is either the doctor told you, oh, you get your ass over to the gym, or, lower your cholesterol or whatnot, or I can't fit into my shorts and it's now summer. and I don't like my
Yeah.
life anymore. And all the reasons, I agree with you. You're hitting on something that is just, I guess, just crappy about humanity that that I dislike about us and myself mostly. And it is just that um, we're not motivated purely by the attainment of awesomeness. And in my book, I talk a lot about like living an astonishingly alive life. And if we were to sit and plan our lives, we would say, yes, this is what I want for myself. But again, because of motivation being such a squishy thing that's fleeting, or then it's there and you think it's going to be for the rest of your life, and then like come Tuesday it like evaporated, or we have good intentions, and that to me is exactly what we're dealing with, is that we're riding a wave of wanting things and then slipping back into autopilot and taking life for granted. And the best way that I've ever learned to help shake that up is to be a little bit abrasive about it. And it is to bring mortality into the picture. And it's like, well, if we bring our friend Grim Reaper over and be like, dude, you've got like for me, 1,814 Mondays left. Nothing makes me want to get up off the couch more and do the thing I want to do, rather than just say, I'll do it next week. Then remembering I'm going to be dead, maybe even soon. I mean, hopefully not, but that temporal scarcity is the notion that like when we realize that something that we value is temporary or rare, we tend to treasure it in a very different way. I mean, nothing else works in this way. And I regret being the kind of person that's like, that has to like splash cold water on people, the cold water of death.
Yeah.
But like, it kind of works.
Yeah. It's almost like there's a defense mechanism where, if we always thought about how we were going to die and how we're not doing what we don't want it, what we really truly want to do, we'd be miserable all the time. So part of it is just like maintaining well-being. But you're right. It is a little bit of a defect that prevents us a lot of the time from getting to what we really want to do long-term.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, back to your point about motivation too, you're reminding me about when we adapt fast, and it's really helpful as a species, that when bad things happen, we can kind of come back to a normal homeostasis. But when good things happen, we also adapt. It's called hedonic adaptation, or the hedonic treadmill. We just keep coming back to like the thing that made me happy last month. It's just not cutting it for me anymore. And I need a little bit more, like I need another high. And we know things to be true, for example, about life short, let me get on with my bucket list, or life short, I should probably start to do things that make my body feel more energized and kind of fit, etc. But we might know it in our rational moments, and bizarrely, but we just need really regular reminders. And so, like I wouldn't pretend to say that, again, I research this and I talk about this every day, and I need constant reminders too. I'm not trying to pretend I'm above anything. It's like, we need this. We need consistent reminders and nudges, because otherwise we just go back into this sort of like back to the adaptation, back to the middle ground, which is for many of us, it's the couch, or it's just not living life fully.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about regrets. How can people course correct from potential regrets? And like, what do you think are some of the most common regrets that people I think we've all heard of like the most common regrets of people on their deathbed, which is like, I didn't spend enough time with my loved ones, or I left things unsaid, or I forget what some of them are. But how do we get out of the cycle of living towards those inevitable regrets?
Yeah, I'm really happy you asked this question, because this for me it's kind of the crux of it all. And it's where I think we have the most agency and power. Okay, so this good old fashioned exercise, the deathbed regret exercise, where you imagine yourself, the time is near, my friend, and you get to look back on your life. And then this is where I will discern and say, okay, that there are like two different kinds of regrets that exist. One are regrets of commission, and they are the things we did that we wished that, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, we wouldn't have done, like the mistakes, the bullying, the negative stuff, the affair, the DUI. I'm going like real dark here, but like even just stupid stuff that like I wished I hadn't taken the job in, I don't know, New York.
Yeah.
And then, but those things don't tend to haunt us on our deathbeds. The thing that haunts us on our deathbeds and on the way there is what's called the regrets of omission. And those are the regrets about things that we didn't do that we kind of wondered about and wished, well, what would have happened if I did apply for that big job? Or what would have happened if I did go back to school? Or I did, make up with my mother, or I did get that makeover, or whatever the things are that we long to do. And so this is the opportunity. You're on your deathbed again. And imagine, not again, but imagine you're still there. You haven't died yet. And you were thinking about, what would I wished that I had done that I didn't, either because I didn't have the time or make the time, or I was scared. And it could be something really small. It could be like, I wished I was just more confident. That's not small at all. Pardon me. It could be something big, like I wished I was more confident and made better choice, like made more bold choices in my life. Or it could be, I wish that I had, gotten together more with my friend, Mindy, before she went and died. Or it could be, I wished I had tried more interesting foods, or I wished I learned how to speak French. Obviously the examples could go on and there's not enough time in your podcast for this, but the goal is come up with a bullet point list, big stuff, small stuff. And then that's your list of what I call pregrets, because you're not dead yet. Like, you could still totally take action on them if you wanted to. And you might look at that and be like, yeah, I don't really care if I want to speak French anymore. It's not a big deal. But whoa, do I ever want to go make up with my mother? Or do I ever want to book that trip to go to the Croatian coast? Like, yeah, that's the thing I want to do that'll make me feel alive because I'm not dead. Go do it, right? Prevent the regret. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have anything like that? Like you do a lot of great, cool things, but most of us have stuff that we'd think. What do you think?
Yeah, I have this game I play with friends, which I call Alternative Lives, which is like, if you could start over knowing everything you know now, like not just one thing you would change about your life, but like, what alternative people would you want to be? Like, oh, I would want to, have started a YouTube channel back when YouTube started and be a famous YouTuber. Or I would want to be a professional gamer, or I would want to, be a computer scientist, because I think I would have really liked coding, but that's just not the way my education led me. And now I'm, so far down in the career I'm in now, and it doesn't really make sense for me to go back. And, there are a lot of different ways you could think about it. It might maybe something like, I would have just chosen a different career, chosen to do college differently. Like, I think one of my biggest regrets, and I don't, in a sense, I'm very accepting of it because it led me to where I am. It helped me meet my wife. It did a lot of great things for me. But I was a collegiate athlete. I was a rower. And I started in 8th grade and rowed all the way through college. Wow. And that's I think way too long for someone to do rowing. But it led me to a lot of injuries. It really affected my health negatively, especially towards the end. And a lot of that lasted afterwards. And it made me extremely insular in college, such that the only people I spent time with were my teammates, who turned out to be people post rowing I didn't want to spend any time with at all. And I don't talk to any of them. And so I think I kind of squandered this opportunity in college to, make a lot of friends and have different experiences that would have been really meaningful in college. And, I'm accepting of it because, like I said, it's how I met my wife. And it did provide a really awesome structure for me and taught me a lot of really important lessons. But that's one of the way I think about regrets, this like alternative lives thing.
Oh gosh, that all of your listeners, including me, we're going to play this game tonight, this weekend with friends at dinner.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And this is where, from some examples, so now you're highlighting the difference too between there's what's called open door regrets and closed door regrets, just to further complicate things. But I just love it. So let me bring it in.
Yeah, please.
Some regrets are like literally closed door. Like, you can't mend your relationship with your mother if she's dead. Okay, that's I'm sorry I say things so starkly, but you can't necessarily, for you, like thinking about going back to college and you would have been maybe more social in a different way, or maybe adjusted your rowing commitments. That like literally is water under the bridge. Get it? Nah.
Yep.
And so you can't change that literally the ship has sailed, the door's closed. And those will have, again, those can be regrets of omission, things we didn't do, but that we don't have the chance. Most regrets, though, of omission, so again, the paths not taken, the wondering what could have happened if, are still open doors. And so I'm just going to challenge you for a second, just to wreck your whole world, okay? And for fun. I say wreck lovingly. You mentioned like your career, you've gone down the path so far, and that to go back and do coding, right away my antenna go up, because of course I'm in like this zone of it's never too late until it's like really too late. But so that's an example for some people where like you may just not even have the real appetite. Like it may not be tugging at your soul enough to be like, all I do is look up and fantasize about my life as a coder.
Yeah.
But if you were, like if you, and I'm just going to use you as an example, or like other people that are like, I can't stop thinking what it would be like to save the sea turtles. And then like they could go back, right? Because like this is life. Like if you, let's assume you get one go, and if you get more, that's awesome. But all we know is we've got this one right now till it ends. And so if someone is so interested in sea turtles, but they've been working maybe like my dad was as a completely disenchanted accountant, there's nothing stopping us other than society, other than the fear of like, well, my income's going to change, my title's going to change, my level of competence, and therefore my ego is going to change. All the things. I mean, a lot of change. It is not easy. Yeah. And usually, it is worth it to try. And I am going down a path here of a big example, which I do think is daunting for most of us. I mean, I'm the biggest chicken of all, so I would find that very scary, even though I have changed careers a couple of times, so it can happen. But I would say for most of us, it's the small stuff that can make the difference. So it's that if someone would regret, maybe for you, I'm going to extrapolate to make a point, but like, I was more insular in college, which might indicate a desire to have more meaningful connection with people that are your people, that you like to laugh with, have fun with, do your thing with. Then maybe that's wait a minute, maybe this is an indication that I do want to call Reggie more, because we always do have fun and it makes me feel good. And maybe I want to bolster that relationship. So there are opportunities where you don't have to go to your deathbed regretting that you and Reggie only saw each other twice a year.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think I have found ways to leverage those regrets to be a lot more forward in investing in relationships. Like, if my friend says, I have the day off and it's 2 hours away and, I'd have to pay for Ubers and all this stuff, I'm like, I'm going to make this work. And so that's really helpful for me. Being able to and then go ahead.
Well, you're highlighting how regrets are actually some of the most useful negative emotions out there, because they can be instructive about how to further shape and shift your life. But you're going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to change topic slightly, which is, you mentioned, we only have this one life. And one thing, sometimes I listen to like futurist podcasts and stuff like that. And they talk about how like in 10 years and 20 years with the path of AI and gene editing and things like this, we may not have the same longevity expectations. Like it may not be 4,000 Mondays anymore. You might have to change the title of your company. And that will require people to possibly re-educate themselves and have multiple careers. How do you think that changes the game with regards to regrets and like being able to start over? Do you think it will make people more likely to like make these big changes, knowing that they have like this big longer time course that, I'm not going to be an accountant. Maybe I would be an accountant for another 10 years if that's what I needed to like get to retirement. But if all of a sudden I can live for another 100 years, oh, hell no, I'm not being an accountant for another 100 years. Like I need to figure something else out. Like everyone else is going to go back to school and find something new. I'm going to do the same thing. Or do you think it's going to make it harder to change because now we have another excuse to kind of kick the bucket because we're going to live even longer?
Oh God, this question. So great. I believe, sadly, that it is the latter of what you just said, because this is the great fear that some existentialists think about, is that if we live forever, for example, our
Yeah.
lives would kind of be garbage, because all we would be doing is
Mm.
thinking, yeah, I'll go back to school and learn how to become a, sea turtle saver like later, because there's always
Yeah.
a later. I think what we're doing, and there's a quote by like Anatoly France, I'm going to bungle it, but um, about the idea that, man, we want to live forever, but we don't even know what to do with our first life. Like we want to live like again and again and again. And the reason I'm saying all this is because I think that for many of us, fear rules the roost. So as much as the notion is nice that, oh, cool, if I get to have not 4,000 Mondays, 40,000 Mondays, say, then I'm going to have, I'm going to have like these 19 different careers, and I'm going to plan them all, and I'm going to do all these things. But again, humans, we live with the path of least resistance. And back to the idea about kind of what feels easier and comfortable and safe. And I think that what we're doing is we're aggrandizing the problem of not living wide and deep. We're going to live longer, but I'm not sure if what we're going to do is. Have you heard of Parkinson's law? It's that annoying thing we do where like we will drag out the work we have to do with the amount of time we have to do the dragging.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if you got like 3 weeks to do a project, took you 3 weeks, when if it could have been done in a week,
Yeah.
So I think we're just going to like take our lives and then just keep doing later. I'm going to visit the
Yeah.
Croatian coast later. Oh, I'll visit
Yeah.
that in year 109,
Yeah.
when I still think what we're doing, because human nature is going to remain the same, right? Like I still think, and now there's like room for people like me, like waving my pom-poms here for the Grim Reaper to be like, oh, but wait, no, like let's live all these versions. Let's live all the
Yeah.
alternatives of our lives. Let's be the
Yeah.
coder. And then but I
Yeah.
do think we tend to kind of live a little bit narrow. So I'm
Mm.
deeply suspicious. And for those reasons, I'm out.
Yeah. Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And then how do you think about like ways to increase meaning, or like you mentioned, for a lot of people, some of these bigger regrets, especially around career, require a step down in income. Like, how do you think about increasing meaning, happiness on a budget or with less financial means?
I've had a couple different thoughts. One, just to get the big thing out of the way, it's like, I think we need stories of inspiration about people maybe who have made changes in their lives. If just to continue on the theme of like, if a change means, this is the famous story, you've got somebody who's like the lawyer earning just heaps of dough and then makes a career change because they are so miserable. And then they are making less money, but they're like, man, I just wish I did it sooner, kind of thing. So I think we need lots of inspiration to feel good that, wow, it's literally worth it, in order to sometimes sacrifice a little bit of what the trappings of success look like. And so that I do think it's possible. I recognize it isn't easy. And I do think that, again, getting back to that notion that we have to remind ourselves, if time is limited and you don't have that many Mondays, how do you want to spend it? And would you get to your deathbed feeling like, I wished I had maybe tried and given it a go elsewhere? Because the truth of the matter is that many people who make a career change that represents an income decrease, it is often just for a matter of time anyways. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to start at the
Yeah.
bottom of the totem pole and you're probably going to climb up again. And I'm not going to say you'll make as much as a partner in a law firm. I don't know. But so that's just like big picture money.
Yeah.
But I'm just so delighted that of all the examples that I give in my book, and not all of them, but a majority of them, I talk about this notion about things being cheap and cheerful, about them being just simple things in life, that many things we can do to change our experience about feeling alive, feeling like things have depth with meaning. They are things that are accessible to us in most days if we kind of just looked at life differently, if we opened our eyes, maybe, and did that moment of appreciating, like, whoa, like looking around the dinner table, like this like motley crew of family that you're just annoyed by. But sometimes it's the shift of like, I get to be here, and like,
Yeah.
and like people who've had brushes with death, they come home from the hospital after their coma and they come in, they're like, I love the fact that my daughter is sitting there in her stupid princess costume. Like, I'm just so glad that I'm here and that she's here.
Yeah.
And that is a bit romanticized, that it's not that simple just to be super appreciative every moment. But oftentimes it's looking at life and going, okay, you know what? Write out a list of things that make you happy. And most of them have to be accessible in your, kind of in your neighborhood. And most of them, when I talk to people in workshops and they come up with their ideas, it's the little stuff that they might get to do in their day. Like, I just love reading a fiction book, like a chapter, while I'm having lunch, or eating my sandwich, or I love cooking with my wife and like trying a new recipe. And even if it screws up, then we just have fun with it. And, and like, other than the cost of groceries, which you're going to eat anyways, these are little tiny little examples. Or, wow, I just love it when I know one woman who is committed for her son is in preschool and finishing preschool for like the last couple months. And she's like, every Friday, I'm going to take him out and go for lunch. And her son loves Subway sandwiches. She's like, it's so cheap. It's like 45 minutes. I'm going to go and we're going to go to Subway and he's going to get his little sub and we're going to have this little time together. And then I'm going to bring him back, or I don't know what her day's like, but she's just like, that's joy. That did not take a whole ton of rejigging of life or a whole lot of cash, So I just love that most of these things can actually be becoming like a tuning into what brings you joy.
Yeah.
Scheduling it in and doing it, not waiting for it to happen to you. Because let's all just lament. A good life does not get handed to you. No one's going to hand you necessarily a joyful day. You got to construct it. And that is something that usually is easier and freer than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that made me think of when you talk about the near-death experience and coming back. I certainly won't call it a near-death experience, but earlier this year in January, I was actually hospitalized for a week with COVID. I've really bad breathing. I've bad asthma my whole life, and my blood oxygen levels got down to like the 80s, which if it's below like 95, you're supposed to go to the hospital. And to get to the 80s, my allergist told me you have to hold your breath for a minute and a half if you're healthy. So that's like how I was like walking around. So I was in the hospital for a week. I had to be given oxygen, like all this stuff. And after that, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, even if they haven't had a near-death experience, like being really, really sick, like having food poisoning. Like you just come out of that moment being extremely grateful. And one theme I have in my life is, and one thing I'm really proud of myself for is like having a lot of resilience and always being able to start over. I actually just got my first tattoo, and it's a phoenix.
Cool.
Which symbolizes like rebirth and resilience. And
that's a nice tattoo.
Thank you. And so that's like a thing that I remind myself of, is like taking pride in this attribute of resilience, being able to start over. How do you help people craft that? Because a lot of people can have these types of experiences that could turn into a moment of appreciation for other things, and could turn into this realization of our own mortality. But a lot of people can also get debilitated by it, unfortunately. And like, how do you help people gain that resilience and gain the ability to like benefit from these moments?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for sharing your story about COVID. That sounds scary. And also, and sounds like it was sort of insightful for you in a way. And that insight that you're talking about, even the twinge of it, is, I'll talk about for a second, like Gen Pop, like average Joe or Jane that has not had a brush with death, like that little flirting with, oh, whoa. Like you might have had a moment for a week in the hospital. Like a week is a big deal. It's not overnight.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't want to put thoughts in your head, but like, percentages can change overnight. So for those that have not had that, this is the work I do, is trying to create extremely safe near-death experiences that are, we're not even anywhere near death, but I want us to contemplate it and think about it and imagine what it would be like to have had the brain tumor removed, as I tell the story about a guy in the book, or somebody who was a meth addict who was going to kill herself and did come back and rebirth, and like Phoenix rising, hello. All the stories about people who've had their, cancer's in remission, or they came home from COVID and they can breathe again, or little things like even a suspicious mole can freak some people out, right? Like, whoa, I thought it could have been, oh God, it's melanoma, it's not melanoma. Okay, good. So I want us to capture not the fear, but the experience of that appreciation for life. And usually what that does is it helps tune us into the priorities that matter, and then also deprioritize the garbage that actually doesn't matter at all, but we were just putting way too much credence into it. So I think that that's part of the exercise. But your real question was like, for people who actually had stuff go on, maybe not even of the near death variety, but like just life, like the variety package where resilience is required. Yeah. I think one of the consolation prizes, I guess, of having stuff happen is meaning that is made from it. Because a recipe for meaning is usually hardship, struggle, suffering, blood, sweat, and tears, all the things that we don't sign up for actively, unless you're like a tough mudder, you're like trying to compete. And that is stuff that over time does end up feeling really special and poignant and meaningful in the end, and helps us to see, wow, like, look what I achieved, look what I made it through. I mean, I'm sure you know about post-traumatic growth that it's like somewhere between 35 and 65% of people that go through trauma emerge at a higher level of psychological functioning than people who didn't. They've literally grown and expanded because the exposure to such trauma and trash in life, just the hard stuff, could be of all sorts, right? Ends up becoming something that can literally, like, what's the expression, like forged by fire. So I think there can be that bittersweet appreciation, which, to be super honest, back to the Grim Reaper, the ultimate disappointment of life is that it's going to end. And so I do think that that's the bittersweetness, the yin and yang that I love to play with. It's like, yeah, this thing that you're maybe taking for granted and maybe squandering a little bit, or maybe you did have this crappy thing go on and now you get to put some pieces back together and rebuild it in a way, like you're saying, alternative life, like new chance to start over, fresh start. Maybe this is the version of life that's actually going to be a really cool one, where I take those regrets in the making and I like course correct them, and I make sure I'm not going to skid in at the end and feel like I left life on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard of it, but for the audience, Jodi, there's a really excellent book, one of my favorites, called Mindset by Carol Dweck, which is all about growth mindset and ways to develop it. It's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, that ability to grow through things and the ability to change. So I'd really encourage people to check that out. I think it fits really well with a lot of your work too.
Well, I love the way you're bringing it up too, because the fixed mindset, which, by the way, I know very well, like failure is an indictment on your soul, your deeply flawed self and soul. And like, how do I avoid life? How do I avoid scenarios where I will not make it really clear that I don't know and that I might fail and look like an idiot? And that to me is this example of like living wide and deep, like going for it, fully participating. Yeah. You know what? Maybe you try out for the job and you don't get it, or you try out for the team, or you do the thing. And like, with rowing, like you gave it your all and you get to experience, yes, some highs, yes, some lows. And I think that back to the fixed mindset of like, well, I'm just going to live a life that's actually smaller so that I don't put myself out there and risk feelings of rejection and failure and shame and all the fun things. And you're highlighting, I think, with this topic of mindset, that I think it does take courage to live a life worth living. And that's another reason why, again, back to as humans, even if we lived a heck of a lot longer, thanks to Mr. and Mrs. AI, like it's, unless they deliver a dose of courage, with this extended lifespan, I think we are still going to have some dreams, but still kind of play small, because it's so much safer to do so,
Yeah. And you're also making me think of, I think it's probably way more rare, and you probably encounter a lot less of these people, but it's interesting. I'm one of my hobbies is I'm a bodybuilder, and I wouldn't class myself in this category, but a lot of bodybuilders, especially professional ones, part of the sport is steroids, performance enhancing drugs, and they're literally taking years off their life to pursue this dream they have of bodybuilding. And a lot of them say, like, I'm okay with the fact that I may live 10 years shorter or 15 years shorter because
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing what I love and I'm
Mm-hmm.
living a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm.
How do you how do you help people who are on that end of the spectrum and possibly are going to have regrets that way of like they pursued the dream too hard and like they think they're living without regrets, but maybe they are going to have them later on.
Oh God, this conversation is making me explode with just such excitement here. You're bringing up this topic. Well, I mean, first of all, there is that whole thing of like, I don't know what makes a good life for people. You know, like there's a presumption that we value length.
Yeah.
Quantity over
That's a good
quantity.
point.
And that's always like, that's a really tangly conversation. Because like,
Yeah.
here's the question that I was going to go to first. And I've posed this and I need to repose it. I don't know, on a blog post or something. It's this idea of like, would you rather live a 7 out of 10 life and maybe get to 80? Would you rather have an 8 out of 10 life and get to 70? Would you rather have like a 9 out of 10 life and get to, I mean, maybe the numbers, we can massage them because obviously 60 sounds like super young, but like, and the research is super compelling because, and now we're going to talk about how flawed studies are here. And you know this full well as former researcher. It's like, they ask people in the lab, they call it the James Dean effect. You know, the famous actor died early in a car crash.
Yeah.
And the idea was, is it better to die early and young, but on a high in life, like doing the thing, like, like winning Hollywood, or on the stage, bodybuilding up a storm, feeling amazing about yourself for today? And most people in the study said that, especially the younger people, but said that they did think that the highly valued life was one that was kind of like went out with a bang on a high, even if it meant it was short.
Yeah.
Now, in the moment, like this is what you're getting at. It's like, the difference between our current self and future self. We can't always reconcile those people.
Yeah.
But because you're saying on your deathbed, they'd be like, my mitral, that my valves in my heart are closing because of my bodybuilding or my my steroids or whatever it is. And like, damn it, I wished I hadn't done that. But I don't know. Because maybe for them, it's like,
that's
I
a good point.
killed it on stage. And I just thought that was like, that for me was the pinnacle. I think there's probably a middle ground, but I think we could endlessly debate this one. This one's fun. And I'm so curious, like, what do you think?
Yeah. I think there's also, I've never seen the study, but I've heard people talk about it where they asked like Olympians, would you give up 10 years or 20 years of your life for a gold medal? And like the vast majority of them said yes.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with present versus future self. Like, I think a lot of people's answer would change when they're older and they have a family and now they value things very differently and they would give anything for another year with their family. But like, how do we even evaluate at that point if it was a happier life? Like what, because like how they're assessing whether their life was happy or not isn't necessarily a reflection of how happy they were back then versus now. It's like how happy they are right now. So it's like really tricky question.
It is. You're asking all the right questions that I know that well-being scientists love to just brainstorm in a room and study and these different perceptions. And it goes to the idea that, many of us are, we talk about living in the moment in a mindful way, but there's also the mistake of sometimes just saying like, for today, it could insert example here, right? It could be, I'm going to have the fries because I love them. And like, I could die tomorrow or not, or you could then just have fries every day. And then that would lead to a different feeling of, on the way to the deathbed. This is just that, like, I'm coming back to that question I posed earlier when I asked, a bunch of people, do you want the 7 out of 10 life, 8 out of 10 life, or 9 out of 10 life, decreasing ages or whatnot. And most people kind of chose the middle of the road, like the 8 out of 10 life, even if it meant a little compromise on age, but not as much of a compromise as wanting a 9 out of 10. So that one seemingly is the most alluring. Now, if I'd asked a bunch of 18-year-olds, I'm sure they all would have picked that because they would have been like, getting to 60, like that's 3 lifetimes away,
Yeah.
but I don't know any better. But so, yeah, it's all super squishy. And all this
Yeah.
comes down to this notion of subjective life satisfaction is what
Yeah.
it's called. It's just like, I feel like the best we can do is just like make choices in the moment that allow us to feel alive while being one eye open to,
Mm.
and is this going to kill me? Like, I'm going to be
Yeah.
super honest. I did an article on all the different life expectancy calculators online. There's just a bunch of them. Like every life insurance company out there has their own. And on some of them, you can plug in like how much alcohol do you drink and how much
Yeah.
do you exercise and all the little lifestyle factors that will determine your likelihood of living longer or shorter. Well, me over here, I like a cocktail. I like a glass of wine. So I enter in what I drink and it gives me like, it does not make that noise, but it tells you like how long you're going to live. And then I'm like, well, what if I just fiddle? And I'm like, what if I drank less? And then I'm going to be super honest with you. This will reveal how horrible I am. It told me that if I drank, whatever percent less a week, that I would live like 1.08 or 1.8 years longer. And I was like, no, thanks. Like,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
would rather enjoy my life and have some fun and enjoy the cocktail and
Sure.
all the reasons. And does it mean that it'll abruptly, end my life? I also fully recognize that it might, ruin my life in the meantime with cancers and other things. So let's just change the subject in a hurry. But anyways, these are choices we make where it's
Yeah.
the giant trade-off. It's
Yeah.
the giant trade-off of how much do you work because you love your work and it's helping you achieve versus spend time with your family. How
Yeah.
much, what do you value? And so I think that we're riding that wave, but being conscious of, am I feeling alive? Am I doing things that make me feel alive that are generally
Yeah.
responsible, that I won't feel like a complete idiot on my premature deathbed?
Yeah. And is there a way to assess? Like, I think a lot of people like me probably feel like they're in the middle. Like they're maybe not living their life to their full potential, but they don't feel, but they're generally happy. Is there a way to assess like how much you are, delaying happiness and putting off things, and like how much you are fulfilling this ideal of maximizing our time?
Yeah, great question. Without there being a formal, empirically based study, other than like they're just more traditional life assessments, but this is not what you're getting at. My way of doing this, and this is just based on experience of working with individuals and teams for years, is having the conversation with yourself or, with a coach, but like being honest with yourself. And where would you, in discussing a certain topic, do you feel that sense of, is it a pang? Like check in with your body and your mind. Is there a topic that when you're talking about it and you're thinking, oh, like I feel like I'm doing I feel like I'm wasting my time here. Or I feel like I could be giving myself a shot at more joy if I really just, went and did that or spent more time at this or less time at that. I think we have more answers than we know about what makes us happy and where our sense is. And it's a spidey sense. And sometimes it's super buried underneath all the fear and all the cultural determinants about what we should be doing or not. But it's there. And we just have to sometimes ask and listen and be like, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? Or what would I do in my alternate life? Like your thing. A friend of mine recently, a coach, Katie Macon, she's a great coach. She said, what would you do if you had 5 bonus lives?
Yeah.
And these are all just head games in order to get us thinking creatively about the life that we long to live. And at some point, if we just keep playing this game long enough, we're going to get some good answers about what's truly feeling resonant, what's truly feeling like this could be cool, or like this really could be a dream come true. And I guess the thought is like, what can you do to just give yourself a shot at one of it? Like just take one step forward. It doesn't need to be all of it. It can't be all of it. I mean, we don't have time. We don't have the energy. Probably don't have the money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Jodi, can you tell us a bit about the book, where people can find it, what they can expect from it? And yeah, anything else you want to leave on?
I really appreciate you asking about it. It's called You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. And it is kind of a step-by-step pre-mortem way to look at your life, way to look at regrets. And we go into detail about how death can help you. And then we talk a lot about vitality and living with meaning as those 2 different dimensions. And then it's really action-oriented to get you wrapping up and saying, okay, so what's next? No, really, what's next? There are no less than 17,000 questions to get you thinking in the book. And yeah, I'm over at 4000mondays.com. And so you can find links to buy the book there, wherever you buy books. But and I have a blog post on Mondays where I riff about all this stuff and have lots of fun. So it'd be cool for people to join in.
Cool. I'll have a link to all that in the show notes. And thanks again for your time, Jodi. Really enjoyed it.
Time well spent. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. You can find The Scott Mize Show on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Please leave a comment, like, review, or share the podcast with your friends or followers. It helps more people find the show.